Some stories are buried, others are erased. Each tale you hear is either true or spun from fiction. It's up to you to decide. Subscribe if you haven't. Dim the lights. Let's begin. Where the Party Ends. Venice's Plague Island. 1. In the year 421, so the stories say, Venice was born. A mere 4.34 billion years after the Earth was. But before the city rose from salt and tide, the lagoon was only a place of water and wind. Marsh birds hovered over the reed beds, egrets, ibises, cormorants, dragging lazy arcs across the sky, waiting to stab silver fish with their long beaks, while beneath the lilies, mullet and sardines scattered like sparks. The land itself barely qualified as such, just scattered shoals and tufts of silt that shifted with the season. There were no names for any of it, no stories, just quiet. One of those nameless tufts would one day be called Poveglia. At first, as with all things, it was innocent. A patch of land on a planet of water. Fishermen would rest there, children would adventure or picnic. Families rode out in calm weather, laid blankets on the soft grass, and watched clouds crawl in from the Adriatic. No one lived there, no one needed to. It was a place without meaning, just a shore to land on, a pause in the lagoon. But the world of men does not leave purity alone for long. 2. As centuries passed, tides shifted, politically as much as literally. Rome fell. Invaders came. Huns, Goths, Lombards, each time the northern plains of Italy lit up with fire and blood. And each time the people ran. Where do you go when the land burns? You go to the sea. The Venetian lagoon was not very desirable. It was muck, insects, salt air, but it was safe. No horse could gallop through mud. No army could march through marsh, so the desperate did what desperate people do. They adapted. They drove thick cypress trunks into the seabed, millions of them, harvested from alpine forests, floated downriver in bundles like corpses, stripped and hammered down, one beside the next, until they struck clay or stone. Upon that invisible skeleton they laid beams, boards, blocks, until eventually there were platforms, streets, then towers. The city didn't rise, it was pushed, hammered up from mud and panic, forged from exiles, cemented by fear. The men who drove those piles had no name in history, but you can imagine them. Wake, row, hammer, eat, hammer, sleep, dream, and still, hammer. They drove trees into the lagoon until their hands split, and their backs curled like anchors. Some hammered themselves to death, then silence. No more blows. Venice became a miracle, a republic, a maritime empire. But beneath the gold domes and glinting gondolas, the city remained what it always had been. A forest of submerged trees, beneath the dream of building something from nothing. Many were old growth, centuries tall, wide enough around to circle 3 men with linked arms, felled, drowned, forgotten, and just beyond it, minutes away by boat, was the island progress forgot. Poveglia. 3. It began to change in the 1300s. Plague came to Europe, and cities built on closeness needed distance. Venice, Ever clever chose isolation. The plague did not knock. It flooded. It bloated tongues, blackened groins, softened gums until the teeth fell out. Even priests stopped giving last rites. And so laws were written, fast ones, merciless ones. Venice was a jewel, yes, but one ringed in death. The tides brought more than trade. They brought rats, fleas, a darkness no prayer could lift. The solution was simple: push it away. A mile from the edge of Venice, just far enough to forget. The island was chosen, it was still nothing then. Low earth, a few huts, a fishing shed. That was enough. They called it a lazaretto, a quarantine island. But quarantine was a soft word for what it became. The first boats crossed under cover of night. No one wanted to see. The sick were rowed across, their bodies wrapped in cloth, faces blistered and blackened. Some were ill, some were already dead. Some would die on the way. Children were curled in baskets. Mothers stuffed rags into their mouths to stop the screaming. The oarsmen, no plague masks not yet, ferried them like cargo. They were the literal death boat men, their jobs unmarked, unblessed. Some were probably joking, drinking as they rowed, oblivious to irony. The island got its first experience of men and began to sour. And when the bodies came faster than the rats could eat them, the fires began. At first, they built pits, but the ground filled quickly. They dug more. The canals ran thick with smoke and the smell of roasted meat. They built pyres. By the end of the first season, they weren't separating the dead from the dying anymore. The green grass was gone. The fires ate everything. Graves were dug, then abandoned. The soil was too wet. Sometimes they dug and found water, not earth, just holes in the sea. Bodies floated, so they tried to weight them with stone. That didn't always work. The dead would rise, lay in the sun, as if they were trying to tan their pale skin. Some say the ground, too, began to move, to bubble, with the swell of decay. The island was no longer a place of rest. It was a furnace, a pit. It had earned a new name, the Island of the Dead. If you were suspected, you got the free ride. A cough, a fever, a nosebleed at the wrong time of day. Off you went. They told the sick they were being sent there to recover, or die. Most hoped for the first, no one expected anything but the second. The boats were state-run. You had no say. 4. The brothers were 12 and 9, Matteo and Silvio. Their parents were already gone. One neighbour claimed they'd coughed all night. Another swore they looked fine. No one waited to find out. They were taken before dawn, bundled in sacks. A soldier on the boat told them it was a holiday, that the fire was for bread. Silvio still had his wooden spinning top. Matteo carried a slip of paper with his family name. The island, now bent, didn't take long to bend them too. They were thrown in a tent with 17 others, men, women, one baby that never made a sound. The top went missing, the paper was used for kindling. The worst part, Matteo later whispered to another boy, wasn't the coughing, it was the sound of the carts. The wheels were made of iron, they shrieked across the stone like dying animals. That sound meant someone was coming, or going. Mostly going. The boys tried to hide, find beds and huddle beneath like at home. But there were no beds, just straw. They tried to run, but the island was small, and the guards had dogs, and the dogs had teeth. Some say Matteo lasted 3 days, others say a week. But no one really knows. No one wrote it down. They burned the names with the bodies. The plague came in waves, 1348, 1575, 1630. Each time the island filled with Matteos and Silvios, as if they were born again and again to suffer the same fate. An army of children to feed the fire. Each time the pits grew deeper. More than 160,000 people died in Venice from the plague alone. How many were brought to Poveglia, no one can say. But the soil is black. When fishermen cast their nets too close to shore, they sometimes pull up teeth. That's not a story. That's in the records. The top 2 meters of soil are said to be more than 50% ash and bone. And yet, after all that, they came back. The plague ended or slowed or changed its name. The ghosts of the brothers blew away with a soft wind. Venice grew again, and the island, dark as it was, remained. 5. By the 1700s, the Republic had collapsed. Napoleon came and went, never giving the world a good look at his right hand. The bones were left alone, the pits sealed, grass grew, birds returned. Even new cypress trees had taken root, ignorant of what the Venetians had done to their ancestors. Wild fennel pushed through the cracks, and Venice remembered its old trick. This time, not to house the dying, but the insane. The hospital was built, or rebuilt. It was called a psychiatric facility, though the word meant little. The architecture was meant to soothe. Columns, symmetry, open courtyards. Wards with oversized windows that flooded with light and looked over the lagoon. From the outside, the hospital looked peaceful, but inside the beauty had been boiled out. Windows were bolted shut, curtains, when there were any, hung stiff as bark. Doors creaked on purpose. The people who were sent there referred to it as l'ultima fermata, the last stop, l'isola del silenzio, the island of whispers, il posto dove si dimentica, the place where you're forgotten. There were few staff, fewer visitors. Patients came from across the region, those who saw visions or wept too often or simply no longer pleased their husbands. One of them was named Livia. She believed her hands were birds. 6, not wings, birds. 2 small white ones, a robin and a starling. She spoke to them gently in the mornings and wrapped them in cloth when the wind blew. First her husband called a priest, then a doctor, then the police. They brought her to Poveglia in 1922, just after the hospital officially opened. She was 27, she had no children, her eyes were dark and often wide. She didn't scream, didn't attack, she just spoke too often to her hands. And once, just once, scratched a woman in the market after claiming her birds had been startled. Her diagnosis was hysteria with delusions. She came to stay. The husband remarried. 7. The hospital director at the time was a man named Dr. Lunetti. Educated in Milan, published in journals, wore linen even in winter. Because, he said, it made him feel like a Tahitian in the sun. But behind the title and the spectacles, there was something else. Behind the look was a looker, gazing back, a curiosity that had drifted into cruelty, and an island no one cared to visit. gave him freedom. He believed he could cure madness, not with love, not with rest, but with technique and precision. His favourites were the chair and the chisel. The records from that era are sparse, pages missing, names redacted, but whispers survived. They say he invented his own version of the lobotomy, done not through the temple but through the eye, that he opened skulls with tools meant for masonry, that he used chloroform when he remembered, that he recorded the sessions not on film but in notes, dense, written in a Latin so obscure they remain untranslated, that sometimes he took patients to the bell tower. Livia saw him only twice. The first time she wept before she entered the room, not from fear, but because, she said, the birds in her hands were shaking. Lunetti smiled, told the nurse to take her towards C, but he marked her file. A small red O. Her ward was one that held the quiet ones, the mostly passive. They were allowed to move around their rooms, sometimes even walk the halls. The other wards were more akin to prisons. Most everyone was strapped down. The lucky ones in chairs, the unlucky in beds, the very unlucky in closets. There were so many rules, even the perfectly sane couldn't remember them. Don't touch anyone. Don't loiter. Don't raise your voice. And never fall in love. Life was dull. You lived the same day over and over, until you were tired of that day, and eventually tired of living. Meals came on metal trays. Bread like a wet sponge. Broth like the bowl had been dipped in the swamp. If you didn't eat, the nurse would note it down. If you ate too quickly, she'd note that too. Her favourite place was the main room, where she'd stand face pressed against the tall window. 2 boys often played in the yard, kicking a black ball. They must have been inmates too. One mostly ran in circles, while the other kicked the ball at him, then sullenly went to fetch it, so he could do it again. The willows swayed behind them, and beyond that, empty skies. Freedom had a smell, she'd tell herself, even if she couldn't remember it. Outside was life that was green, and water that splashed blue. Inside you were kept safe from the world, from rain, from anything alive. Well, there was a plant once, in their bedroom by the door, but someone had eaten it. Eventually the staff would find her, standing too close to the glass, petting the birds in her sleeves. If she knew someone was coming, she tried to keep them hidden. She'd been marked as a hand-wringer. That was noted, everything was noted. They would lead her back to her room, gently but firmly, because touching the glass was against the rules too. One of her roommates was a girl, maybe 15. She didn't laugh at the birds. She even claimed to see them sometimes. But at night, the girl would whisper things. She said she once saw all the patients' heads fall off their bodies. All of them, all at once. Then the heads stuck out their tongues, hopped down the halls on them, and had a proper dance in the courtyard under the moon. The second time Livia met with the doctor, she did not return. The nurses said she ran, said she jumped from the tower. Her body was found on the stones below, arms outstretched, fingers curled, as if perching. But the truth is harder to find, because a week later Lunetti himself fell from that same bell tower. 8. No one saw it happen. One nurse, fired shortly after, said she heard voices inside. A man arguing with a woman, the sound of birds, a crash, then silence. Some say he slipped, others that he jumped. But the rumour that caught fire was about their affair, that when she met him again, she had told him that his hands were foxes, nervous, clever, always looking for a way out. That she confessed to her roommate she fell in love with his hands first, then with the rest of him. She followed him everywhere, not like a ghost, instead a second shadow. What happened that night, no one can say for sure. Maybe they fought, maybe she begged him to help her build a boat and escape. Maybe he told her he never loved her. But when the scream came, it echoed down the halls like someone tearing linen in half. When they found him, he was still alive. Legs shattered, spine bent, eyes wide. He whispered nonsense for 3 days before he died. His last words were almost clear: "The island will never let me leave." That was the rumour. After that, the tower was sealed, the bell removed, the stairs collapsed, and still, some nights the sound of the bell returns. Tourists say they've heard it, though no one climbs that tower anymore. Locals don't speak of it. They don't need to. Because Venice, for all its romance and light, knows its shadows. And Poveglia is more than shadow. It is wound. By the 1960s, the hospital was abandoned, doors left open, beds still made, records stacked like kindling. The island closed, but it didn't empty. 9. They come to Venice by the tens of millions now. By plane, train, cruise ship. They flood across the causeway and spill into the narrow lanes, pushed by each other towards St. Mark's and the Bridge of Sighs. Each equally desperate to find, photograph and prove they once existed and saw a faraway place. Like tidewater, rolling their suitcases over stones carved 600 years ago. They buy glass from Murano, lace from Burano, masks with feathers, masks with gold, beads, or all three. They lick stracciatella gelato on the bridges and toast Prosecco in the shadows of cathedrals, take selfies with the pigeons they scare. They whisper about ghosts in gondolas, and now, because there are so many of them, Venice has begun charging them. Day passes, tourist taxes, entry quotas. Not to make money, but to breathe. Because Venice, for all its magic, is drowning under the weight of being loved too much. Today, few Venetians live in Venice at all. It is a floating hotel that vomits money. And yet, just a few minutes away by water taxi, sits an island no one wants to visit. An island full of Venetians, though dead, that still welcomes the living just to feel the heartbeat again. 10. Poveglia. A spit of land you can see from the promenade, yet still, somehow, invisible. Between Lido and Giudecca, locals know it, boatmen avoid it, tour guides skip it. Even on the clearest days, it seems to wear a fog of its own. There are no restaurants, no shops, no lights at night. Just ruins, birds and silence. The last legal residents left in the 1960s. Since then, it's been a kind of exile. Abandoned, not by accident, but on purpose. Because even the most rational minds find something wrong there. The air is still, but not peaceful. The buildings crumble, but don't fall. The walls are covered in ivy, but nothing roots deep. It's as if the earth is restless, or waiting. In the early 2000s, an Italian family tried to buy it, restore it, make it into a home. They left after one night. No one has ever lived there again. Legends multiply when left alone, and Poveglia has had centuries of solitude that you can hear screaming from the bell tower, even though it no longer has a bell. It's said the moon disappears when you stand on the island, that you can see it from every other place in the lagoon, but not from there, as if the island erases even light. 11. Still, every year someone tries. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, paranormal influencers with cameras and sage. They sneak onto the island by rented boat, stay a night, leave in the morning with wild eyes and shaky footage. Most don't say much, a few post videos. One woman wept through her entire interview and refused to speak of it again. There is no police tape, no wall, but the warning is clear. No one is meant to stay there long. The island isn't just abandoned, it is shunned. Because while Venice thrives on beauty and theatre, Poveglia is something else. It is memory. Not the kind you frame or celebrate, but the kind you bury and pray does not follow you home. Some say the island is a mouth, that the pits still open and close in the heat, that the wind brings voices, that the bell tower still dreams. It is not evil, just full. Of names, of screams, of small bones and stitched skulls, of red O's in ledgers, of birds in hands. Today it sits, this forgotten island, not floating, but held by old wood, by old wounds, by every story that will never fully leave it. And on still nights, the wind still smells faintly of fennel and fire. That was our first story. But the atlas never closes with a single page. Another tale awaits, drifting in from the edges of what we believe. Truth or invention, you decide. The Island of Children. 1. When they arrived in 1973, they called it a French name that meant the Lost Island of Children. Others simply called it the Island of Lost Children. Similar, but not quite the same. One implied someone had walked away. The other that they were never meant to be there at all. The island was just a loose crumb of earth, balancing on the breath of the sea. A volcanic rise, 10 kilometers wide, shaped like a hand pressed flat into the water. Limestone caves freckled its back. Eastern cliffs dropped off like a snapped jaw. Tide pools winked to the west. On most maps it didn't exist. The trees were thick-trunked, short-canopied, their bark a pale, almost pink tone, like bleached driftwood. No one recognized the species. Beneath them, the undergrowth flowered year-round, tufts of violet and yellow, the petals waxy and bitter-smelling, as if the plants had evolved to warn you not to touch. The island had clearly withstood centuries of typhoons that lapped in like waves on the shore. The limestone ridges were carved like ribs, worn smooth on the windward side, jagged on the lee. The volcano that birthed it had been silent for millennia. No visible vent remained, and in the tide pools, strange life. Needle-legged shrimp the colour of rust, fish with eyes too large and fins too soft, crabs that never moved unless watched. When they flipped over stones, they found nothing but holes. Its nearest neighbours were forgettable. Folklore Atoll, adrift like a lazy thought, 2 days west by modern boat. Chagos Archipelago, far to the northeast, its coral lips barely whispering land. There were no safe harbours, no airstrips. If you arrived, it was by mistake. But when you left, it was on purpose. It was a Chilean environmental team that rediscovered the island first. No one was more surprised than the island, never having been aware it was lost. They were following the migration patterns of the black-throated petrel, thought extinct here, and found them nesting. They came with the best intentions. Bird tags, field guides, bird song, but duly ready for spiders, sunstroke, bird shit. What they got instead was silence, and an overwhelming sense that they'd interrupted something mid-sentence. The mysterious rings of stone. Foundations, maybe, or shrines. Modern men always assume their ancestors worshipped all day instead of eating, drinking, shagging and killing. They tagged their birds, left the ruins mostly untouched, and gladly returned home after a cyclone whipped the ocean into a tantrum. At homes in the bars. After conferences, they bragged about their strange find. The first reports were dismissed. The petrel had been misidentified. The stone rings were volcanic trickery. The coordinates must be wrong. But one man at the University of Concepcion, a soft-spoken ornithologist named Dominguez, insisted on returning. He brought a new team, including a student who would later describe the island as a place that doesn't breathe. Her journal, smudged with salt, ended mid-sentence. They vanished back into the busy current of people, who left no further mark on history. 2, 3 years later, a French archaeological team arrived. They were hoping, at best, for colonial wreckage. Rusted knives, maybe a sailor's bone with a curved tobacco pipe. That's what you usually find out here. Signs of men who tried and failed to make an island love them. The first ashore was Dr. Julien Fontaine, 37, a French archaeologist whose real specialty was Roman aqueducts and toilets. Anything involving the flow of water. This was supposed to be a sabbatical. A warm island in the sun, off the charts. He brought 3 grad students, 2 cases of Pernod, and a manual typewriter. Instead, they found bones. Tiny ones. By the end of their 3rd season, they had unearthed 83 full skeletons. All of them children. No adults, no elders, no worn hips, no teeth with stories. Just children. All under 12. Back in Paris, the osteologists sat in a white-tiled lab that smelled of rubber gloves and strong tea. Each child's remains were laid out like lines of poetry. Brittle, silent, eerily clean. The enamel was pristine. No milk teeth, no rot, no grit. As if they'd eaten something so soft, so yielding, that chewing wasn't required, or they hadn't lived long enough to need it. A femur curved oddly. A skull mirrored another dated 5 centuries earlier. No clear era, no clear cause, just echoes. At first, they blamed it on dwarfism, the island effect, that old evolutionary trick where everything shrinks to fit the cupboard. It's locked in. It's happened before. On Flores, there were hobbit-like humans who coexisted with 3-foot elephants. On Cyprus, pygmy hippos waddled between lemon trees. Even Shetland ponies are born from a kind of island spell. But this wasn't that. Pelvic fusion, growth plates, dental staging. The bones were honest. They were children. And they had been for a very long time. Radiocarbon tests unravelled like a bad dream. The deaths didn't belong to a single era. They spanned centuries, maybe more. Some had DNA overlap. Most didn't, not cousins, not tribes. It was as if 100 different families had all lost the same child to the same place. And they weren't dropped in graves. They were arranged, curled like sleep, some in clusters, others in stone bowls, buried a metre deep, safe from storms. No mass graves, no haste. At the foot of each skeleton, a single black stone, palm-sized, volcanic glass, smooth. The island has no volcano anymore. Later tests linked the stones to a caldera vein near Madagascar, 1,800 kilometers away. No boats, no docks, no trade. And yet, there they were, as if carried by hand, placed like punctuation. The children had not suffered. No blade wounds, no fractured skulls, no marks of starvation. Last meals, fish, seeds, fruit, enough. The island had fed them and then stopped. No disease, no predators, no plausible excuse, just quiet. 3. One final formal excavation was approved, this time with more geologists. They confirmed what some had suspected. The island was laced with caves. Some were shallow pockets where birds roosted. Others ran deeper, cool as forgotten cellars. They found the most important cave in late spring, near the eastern cliff. At first it was just a circle, a crude one, etched in the rock above the entrance. Around it were other symbols, a tree with many roots, a face with no mouth, a curled sleeping shape like a snail or embryo. And at the centre, always, the circle. They dug slowly at first, carefully, setting up a grid system with string and stakes. They used trowels and brushes, dental picks and bamboo skewers, buckets and sieves. The upper chambers were bare, cool tunnels of stone, worn smooth by time. Then came the artifacts that they marked with small coloured flags. The rock tools, clay bowls, a flute carved from bone, etched with spirals. And then there were the paintings. The pigment was organic, crushed berries, burnt bone, fish oil, and something else, a secretion from petrels, normally used in nests. Used here too, like glue or blood. The hues had no right to survive, but they did. The brush strokes were clumsy at first, figures with oversized heads, bright colours, handprints layered over handprints. But over time, they grew more precise. The pigment changed, the figures gained detail, woven garments held hands, small fires, star maps, no weapons, no rulers, no walls, and no signs of struggle. Week after week, the team worked deeper. They dated the soil layers. The oldest art went back perhaps 2,000 years, but the cave had been used continuously, not a burial site, a home. A civilization of children. Around the children were paintings of fantastical beasts. One had a neck like a whip and wings wide as nightmares, later identified as a cousin of Pteranodon longiceps. It would have skimmed low over primeval lagoons, its wingspan reaching nearly 7 meters. Bones hollow as a child's finger, a head shaped like a dagger, eyes angled for hunting. Its colour guessed from melanosomes, ash-blue wings with marbled stripes, and a crown of orange or crimson. The skin leathery. The call, not a shriek but a rasping bark, half hyena, half hornet. It lived at the edge of the Cretaceous and vanished just before the world did. 67 million years ago, long enough to be forgotten, surely not living when the children were. They dug until they entered the final chamber. There, beneath the layers, beneath the stone slab, they found a single small body. A girl, perhaps 7 or 8. Her skull had been caved in, clean, deliberate. A hole the size of a river stone punched through the crown. Around her were broken pieces of red ochre. Her hands had been painted yellow, and the yellow flakes were now scattered about. And after that, everything changed. The paintings above this level were different. The bright colours turned black, the handprints became clawed, the smiling faces vanished. The girl with the hole in her head appeared over and over, first once, then a dozen times, then everywhere. In every pose, with empty eyes, with open mouth, sometimes reaching, sometimes devouring, sometimes crowned. The final layers were chaotic, fires, spirals, falling stars. Then silence, no more paintings, no bones, no trace. The children were gone within a short time of the girl's death, less than a century. 4. Today the island is home to birds, snakes, and the kind of rats that wait until you blink, then blink back from somewhere else. There are no mammals, but there is fresh water, soil rich in calcium. The food chain hums just enough to keep things twitching, which is to say, it is barely enough, but enough. Fontaine's team began to splinter. One student developed a fever that never broke, just hovered, low and constant, like a hum behind the eyes. Another packed quietly at dawn and left without saying goodbye. The geologist, who'd once slept in lava tubes in Iceland, refused to enter the cave again. It felt wrong, he said, like sleeping on your own grave. That was all. And Fontaine, once the most skeptical of them all, grew obsessed. He returned to the cave each morning before the others, spent hours in the final chamber, taking notes he never showed. He began to speak of the paintings as if they were still happening. New ones, he once said, could be forming now. No one ever knew what he meant. Dr. Alain Morel was the first to say aloud what others whispered. In 1976, he published a short abstract titled Enfants sans aînés, Children Without Elders. It appeared in print once, then disappeared. Later, analyses tried to reconstruct what life in the painted village might have looked like before the change. From the char patterns in the soot room to the careful placement of bowls and shells, a haunting picture emerged. Children tending root gardens, weaving reed mats, sorting crushed shells by size. No blood, no barricades, just silence. As if they knew what to do. By instinct, or by something older. Now they had better dates. It appeared that for almost 2,000 years it was a happy place, wrote one anthropologist. It was orderly, it worked. The island fed them, but then it ended. No more toys, no more carved dolls tucked in corners, no more bird bones turned into whistles. What child lives without play? Something was missing. That summer, a map from the NOAA Hydrographic Survey showed the island in 2 places. Once where it belonged, and once 300 miles east. The map was corrected. The officer who logged the coordinates resigned. He later said the numbers made him nauseous. UNESCO cited the site, then uncited it. The journal was reprinted, the issue renumbered, the library copies walked away. Morel retired to Normandy, near where the sea eats the cliffs. He bought a narrow house with moss on the door and salt in the wood. He stopped writing, then stopped speaking. His daughter says he kept a black stone on his bedside table. When she once asked why, he answered only, "They weren't dead," just paused. 5. Only one team member ever returned. Juliette Fournier, technician, 26. Precise, quiet. Would wind string around her fingers when she spoke. In 1984, she went back, not with a university, not with a grant, just her and her fiancé, Luke, a marine biologist with a crooked nose and a camera he never let go of. They caught rides on 3 separate vessels, a research ship out of Réunion, a rust-ribbed trawler crewed by Congolese fishermen, and finally a hired catamaran that lost its rudder halfway there. The journey took 19 days. They anchored off the northern reef and swam ashore with waterproof packs. No flag, no mission, just a field recorder, some dried fruit, and the belief that something had been left unfinished. The tape survives. 11 minutes. Her voice is hushed but calm. The caves are still there, she says. The little tools, the bowls. It's like they were called to dinner and forgot to come back. She describes the soot room again, but also a new chamber, narrow, steep, hotter, not present on any earlier sketch. The air inside, she says, felt used. Not stale, not old, just recently borrowed. Above the chamber's mouth, a single glyph, etched deep. A perfect circle, broken clean through the middle, split like an eye that no longer sees. It was not on any earlier wall. No child had painted it. She never recorded another tape. Neither returned to the island again. Juliet never married. Most of the artifacts had already vanished by then. Packed, shipped, misfiled. Some sent to the Smithsonian, others to the Musée de l'Homme. Ask to see them now, and you'll get a shrug. Not in the catalogue. That too is common. They are somewhere, but not where they should be. 3 photographs remain. One shows a ring of stones, like a child's game, long since ended. Another, a shallow coral bowl, its inside smeared dark. The last shows 3 small skulls arranged in a triangle, a black stone at each corner. On the back, handwritten in ink faded to rust, exiles, exiled. 6. It's still spoken of, but softly, mostly at the dinner parties of biologists or in bed. There were 3 competing hypotheses. Hypothesis 1, the parental island. Some say there was a second island that must have sunk beneath the sea, like Atlantis did. A place that raised children like crops, each in their own plot, kept apart until age 12. Isolation wasn't cruelty, it was design. No mirrors, no voices, no comparison. A society built on separation. Maybe once a year they gathered to learn, to mate, to vanish. Then the cycle began again. That's the theory anyway. The stone rings support it, the sameness, the silence. But no adult beds, no tools too large, and no one's ever found the second island. No docks, no adult bones, no trail of ash or sail, just water. As if the parents never meant to be found, or were never real at all. Hypothesis 2, the rift. A strange theory. There were no boats, no cult, no parents, just a tear, a soft place in the fabric of the world. The rift was a fold in the map. An island that hums on certain nights and disappears by morning. The children wandered in, or were born there, or slipped sideways from somewhere else. The spiral carvings, the faceless figure, the unnatural quiet. All signs of a place not quite stitched to this world. That's why the birds change songs, why the glyphs refuse translation. Nothing was left behind, because nothing was meant to last. The rift doesn't take you, it edits you, crops the world, keeps the children, removes the rest. Hypothesis 3, tampering. And finally, the theory no one wants to say aloud, that someone interfered, that something was altered. The bones were staged, the glyphs were added, that the soot and bowls and coral were arranged for effect. But why? And who? There were no tire tracks, no cigarette butts, no gear. Maybe they were made to vanish, or worse, maybe they walked into the sea. 7. Today, the island is sealed. Officially a bird reserve. No press, no visitors, no trespass. The last aerial photo dates to 1989. The circles are still visible, the trees thin with age. No one has returned, no one is allowed. They did not leave guards. It is guarded, like many Pacific islands, by its isolation. We don't know what happened there. We don't know where the children came from. Only that they were there. At least 83 skeletons, all under 12. No adults. There had never been any adults. Only children, and the stones, and the silence they left behind. 8. I have my own theory. Do you want to hear it? In the beginning it was a garden, paradise, an Eden. No bricks, no gods, no graves. Just earth and water and children. They drew their world in circles. They painted stars and reeds and animals with too many eyes. They danced in ash. They slept curled like seeds. They sang, maybe, or listened. No war, no rot, no voices from above. But something changed. And blood, once spilled, is hard to unspill. The drawings turned dark, the hands became claws, the bright pigment gave way to black. The girl appeared again and again, mouth open, head split like a fruit. And then, nothing. No more colours, no more stories. Silence. The garden was gone. Not burned, not buried, just gone. The children were cast out. Maybe there were once many Edens scattered across the earth, and they all fought to survive and retain their innocence. Maybe there were never supposed to be any adults at all, but they failed. One by one they winked out or drowned beneath the sea, leaving us in darkness. Was it true or just a well-told lie? Tell us what you believe and why. We know many of you listen late at night, sometimes while drifting off to sleep. Maybe you're wrapped in polar bear blankets, deep in the Arctic dark. Maybe you're swinging in a jungle hammock, wrapped up like a snack. Or maybe you're alone in a quiet room, or so you think. Let us know where you're listening from, and whether this story kept you awake or gave you good dreams. And one more thing. If you know a rare or hidden place, a ruin, an old legend, a forgotten town, share it in the comments. Your suggestion might become part of the atlas. If you enjoyed wandering these forgotten corners, subscribe and join us again for another journey into the unknown.